Hello. I'm going to talk about Walter Lippmann's book titled Public Opinion, which has been referred to as the founding book in modern journalism and also the founding book in American media studies. First, I'm going to briefly summarize the book, then I'll expound on 2 points. Then I want to kind of talk about what I believe is the most important message from the book. So who was Walter Lippmann? Mr. Lippmann was a Harvard graduate, honors graduate. He's a member of Phi Beta Kappa, which is the honor society for four-year colleges. His major was in philosophy and languages. He was a journalist and a political commentator. Obviously, he was an author. He authored over 20 books. Public Opinion was his 7th book. He was an advisor to President Woodrow Wilson during World War I. He helped President Wilson draft his famous 14-point speech, which was basically to gain support for America entering World War I. Mr. Lippmann created the concept of the League of Nations. He also had a long-running news article for most of his life in the New York Herald Tribune titled Today and Tomorrow, which he won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for. The book itself, it's not a huge giant book. It was published in 1922. It's about 240 pages. It depends on who's making it. This isn't the book, but this is about how big the book is. It's not huge. It's got 28 chapters, and the chapters are divided into 8 sections, which if you go get the book, which I know you will because my presentation is just going to boggle your mind, so you're going to want to read it. Make sure that the chapters are divided into the 8 sections because it kind of helps. It kind of gives you more understanding of what's going on. My book wasn't, and my professor, Dr. Payne, told me about it, and it really cleared up some things for me. Also, when you get tired from reading, the book makes a good pillow. This isn't the book, and this doesn't make a good pillow, but the actual book does. Last attempt at a joke, I promise. To briefly summarize, let's see. First, Mr. Lippmann presents his idea of the pseudo-environment, which is basically about our flawed perceptions of the world. Then he talks about how these flawed perceptions affect democracy. And then he kind of has a solution or suggests what maybe democracy or our government in America is missing, which I'm not really going to talk about that much. But basically he says our government has no good way of getting intelligent information, and we need agencies, or what he calls intelligence bureaus, to do intelligent work, or to go to get information. The most important part of these intelligence bureaus would be that they need to be separated from any government agency so they won't be influenced. It's a complicated idea, and it really deserves a whole presentation by itself, and you should read the book to find out more about it. So, the perceptions of our world. If you know about the cave people, Lippmann actually starts out the book with the cave people, Plato's cave people story, and that, if you know about that story, you kind of see where he's starting out with. I don't want to explain that story, so I really probably shouldn't even have mentioned it. So, but he gives a dedication at the beginning, and that's how the book starts, and I feel it's kind of a really good intro, and if you know about that story, it kind of helps, I think. So I'm going to shut up about that because I'm just confusing myself. The first chapter he starts out with is called The Outside World and the Perceptions in Our Head, or the world outside and the pictures in our head, which I kind of changed it to the world outside versus the pictures in our heads. But he basically starts out with a story about an island in Europe that had French, German, and American people on it, and they did not know that World War I, had started for 6 weeks, because they only got news every 6 weeks when a boat brought supplies to them. This is kind of sets up what his concept of how our perceptions outside of our direct environment are flawed, and we fill in these gaps in our missing sensory information with what he calls stereotypes. Stereotypes is not used in the pejorative meaning that it is today. It's not meant to be derogatory. It's just this is the things we use to fill in gaps in information that we don't directly see. Stereotypes. We need stereotypes to function. We wouldn't leave our house if we didn't, have some. If we didn't have some kind of belief in what, we walk out the door and we pretty much believe that nobody's going to attack us, or we can, walk down the road and we know a car isn't going to come flying up onto us. It's just the generalizations we have to make to function. And they're not bad. But the problem with stereotypes is when we try to take them outside of our direct environment and plug them into an environment that they don't fit. So, kind of to give you an example of this, if I tell you a story about my dog chewing their bone, unless you know my dog or I explain how my dog looks, you're going to put a picture in your head of a dog from your direct environment. So anyway, this is what my dog looks like. That's what I was picturing, and you most likely weren't picturing that dog. And if you did, you're psychic and you're ruining my presentation. So I don't need that. Another picture I'll show you is Eddie Adams' picture, titled Street Execution, which the title is actually longer than that, but it has the names in it, but I wanted to shorten it to this, it's easier to say. Anyway, when I first saw this picture, I was it really got to me. I was already in a place where I thought the world was horrible, and then I saw this and I was like, there's just another example of evil people brutally killing an innocent person. This picture is actually a lot different than what it says, and Eddie Adams actually said about this picture in a Time magazine interview that pictures at most tell half-truths, and this picture is the truth of this picture is the guy who's being shot was actually a North Vietnamese revenge squad. He was a member of the North Vietnamese revenge squad. If that tells you anything. Revenge squad. They had found this guy at a grave with like 60 bodies in it, and the man who's got the gun in the picture, his name's General Lone. Some of the bodies in this grave were members of General Lone's family and some of his friends. There was also a South Vietnamese colonel. The colonel's wife and some of his kids were in the grave. And this man was found there. The man was bragging about doing the killing and that he was proud to do it. He was in the civilian clothes to try to be, so he could escape the South Vietnamese army. He didn't, needless to say. Anyway, this picture shows how when I looked at it, I looked at the image and filled in all the information that I couldn't directly comprehend, with things I thought I knew. I took samples and made them the truth. It looked like a war scene, Vietnam. I saw a soldier holding a gun to a man who looked like he was a civilian, and automatically it's horrible, brutal, people killing innocent people. We do this with news. We see news, and news, by its very definition, is abnormal, or it wouldn't be news. That's what news is, new information. So we take in new information, and since it's the only information we have about it, we put a normal tag on that. So the abnormal becomes the normal. So how does the pseudo-environment affect democracy? Democracy was framed around the small farming communities, and that was in small communities, it's realistic to believe that every man can know and wants to know and has the interest in governing his community. But today our society has gotten larger and a lot more complex. We have to interact with people outside of our direct environment, and that creates a need for people that can make quick decisions without our direct consent. So our large complex society basically creates something that's very undemocratic, because we have to have few people that make quick decisions. And this is kind of what I call, goes against what I call America's myth of the omnipotent man. We're kind of raised to believe in this idea that liberty is tied to the fact that every man knows everything, or what I call the myth of the omnipotent man. And that just can't happen, especially in a large, complex society. So American people were just reluctant to accept this. And what this basically does is it leads our government to have the need that they have to manufacture consent. They have to spend more time convincing the public to support them than they do governing. And it doesn't matter that the public's basically pretty much ignorant of everything, which we are, and that's not bad. It's impossible for anyone to understand all the ins and outs of everything. So anyway, our culture and this myth we've created of the omnipotent man has created the need for the manufacture of consent, is what he calls it. So what role does media play in all of this, in creating the pseudo environment and in the manufacture of consent? Well, one example from Lippmann's time, and actually Lippmann was on this committee, is the Creel Commission, or the Committee for Public Information, CPI is what it's called. This was run by a man named George Creel. He was a newspaper man and a journalist, and President Wilson chose him to lead this commission to basically get support for America in World War I. Creel and the commission did a lot of things. I mean, they were very successful, but one of their most known things and most successful things was what was called the 4-Minute Men. And these were basically guys or people who were prominent within a community who would go out and give these little speeches to like small clubs and organizations, the Lions Club, the Moose Lodge, the ladies' sewing circles, but mostly they would do it at movies. And when they were they'd have to change reels in between during films, and this would take like 4 minutes. So people, they drafted these kind of cookie cutter speeches to last these 4 minutes to get out news and information. What this did was, first of all, it was they could get the news out fast, so they got it to people before anybody else could. So they basically controlled the news, what was being said to people. And second, people started to become accustomed to getting their news this way. So they would just get their news like this and wouldn't look anywhere else for news. It became the norm to get their news through these 4-minute men. This is very successful. There was over 75,000 4-minute men. So they really had a control over how people get their news. So you could call this press weapons. That's what I have written up there. The modern media today, the internet and the information age, is this helping to illuminate the pseudo environment, or does it just make us more overconfident? I think it makes us more overconfident. We get all this information that comes in from places that we've never been, don't know anything about, yet we get this information and we, like I was saying, news becomes normal, but news is abnormal. But this information comes in and then we believe we have the right to judge or can make decisions about these things that we really have no clue about. So what's the message of all this? First, the most important thing, and this relates to everything in the message, is accepting that there is a pseudo environment, that we can't know everything. It's just not possible, and that's all right. If we accept that, things will be a lot better. And we gotta kill this myth of the omnipotent man. Like I was just saying, we can't know everything. It's not possible. And the myth of the omnipotent man has created this culture in America where we find any kind of suggestion that a person can't know everything is demeaning. So whenever we argue or fight with anybody, we basically feel like somebody's telling us we don't know what we're talking about, and because we have this myth, the omnipotent man, we turn that into anybody disagreeing with us as being demeaning to us, and it's just really created. We don't argue well anymore. We don't realize that every person has their own unique perception, and we need to all talk and share all this information and meld it into one to come up with new ideas and solutions. We need to learn to think critically. This all goes back to accepting the pseudo environment. Thinking critically, take the time, find out real information, understand that most of your information is at best half true, and that you can't really understand anything correctly until you're in that position. Back to Eddie Adams' picture. Mr. Adams was very distraught by this picture for the rest of his life. He was very patriotic, and he was very supportive of the Marines, especially because he spent a lot of time with them in Korea during the Korean War. And this picture was used by anti-war supporters, and it really gave a lot of animosity, or created a lot of animosity towards American soldiers. And this is one of the things that they say made people like, spitting on soldiers when they come back, which I can't even imagine how somebody could do that, but it's a different time. Anyway, maybe if the public would have thought critically, and even maybe Mr. Adams, if he would have, maybe said, maybe I shouldn't send this, but more of the public needed to look at this picture and think more critically, and think more critically about a lot of things. Accepting all the pseudo environment and all this, it's not bad. I mean, it's actually good. We need to recognize that we all each have our own, individual brilliance, I call it. Our perceptions are brilliant because our own perception is the only one of its kind, and there's something in all of us that nobody else knows. And we need to learn that debating and arguing and discussing is all about sharing our unique brilliance. And we could come up with, great things. So that's basically my presentation. I hope the message got across, and I hope you are interested in this book, and thank you for listening.